Namaste, I'm Anuradha Choudry, and it's wonderful to be here. I'd like to start by thanking Vinay Chandra, Vishwajit, and Indica Yoga for this opportunity of sharing about this fascinating world of mantras with all of you. And many of you on this session are very dear friends. So it's wonderful to have this platform as an opportunity to gather all of you from different parts of the world. So a very big welcome to all of you here today. And as Vinay was saying, I grew up in the Sri Aurobindo ashram. I had then went on to do my studies in Sanskrit and my PhD in Vedic psychology. Then worked with Vinaya itself, traveling across many places, doing workshops on yoga psychology mainly. And presently, I'm teaching at the Indian Institute of Technology, Kharagpur, which is the IIT Kharagpur, and where I teach Sanskrit, Indian psychology, etc. So, and I'm also part of the Reiki Center for the Science of Reiki Center of Excellence for the Science of Happiness. So, with these few words, I will start the actual program. So, I'd like to start with the chanting of the Om and just a few maybe instructions before we start. So, while all of you are requested to be muted, if you have any questions, please don't hesitate to unmute and ask me. In the meanwhile, it would be great if we can also join along. So when I request you to join along in your respective places, please feel free to join along, because a lot of this session would include an experiential component. So unless you are allowing yourselves to feel the effect of the sounds, then you would miss out on trying to get a taste of the transformative nature of mantras. So for these words, I would just like to start by sharing my screen here. So I hope all of you can see the screen. I will only put that much on there, so maybe a little more. Is it clear? Can you all see the screen? So before we start, I would like us to do an Om together. So if you can just join your hands, because I say this is a very powerful way of actually unifying ourselves, because the right palm has nerve endings connected to the left brain lobe, and the left palm has nerve endings connected to the right brain lobe. Normally there's only a small bridge that links them. So when we do this gesture, we very consciously complete a lot of nervous circuits. So I'd like you to do this gesture, and together we will sound the Om. So take a deep breath and then sound the Om. Once more. Last time. Observe also what happens to your breath when you do this sound. Observe its effect on the rest of your being. So when I invite you to do these actions and sounds, please, like I said, follow along, because then you would allow yourselves to enter into the spirit of these sounds, which is very important. All right. So I'd like to just start by saying that based on my, I would say, very small steps into the world of mantras, I've had a few insights, few understandings, and also based on the reading of many other sadhakas who have delved deeper into this world earlier, I thought that what I would propose today is like an attempt to deconstruct the mantra in attempt to reconstruct ourselves. So I will try and share with you what really the mantra is. Again, these would all be really from a very personal experience of the journey in the world of mantras. All right. So please feel free to add on, to ask questions as they arise in your mind. So, the mantra tradition is known as mantra yoga. So it is a yoga, and by yoga we know that we are essentially referring to the unity, the fact of unifying all the different levels of oneself. So there is a concept of unifying in the word yoga. So what do we mean by mantra yoga? And then this particular tradition has also been referred to as Nada yoga. So what again do we mean by Nada yoga? So Nada yoga is relatively more easy to understand because it comes from the word Nada, and Nada means sound. Okay, so Nada means sound, and therefore mantra yoga, or this particular tradition, is the yoga that is dealing with how sounds operate and how do we consciously engage with these sounds in order to experience greater degrees of unification and alignment. That is the objective of this particular approach to in this larger tradition of yoga, to understand ourselves better. The whole point of sound also evokes a lot of questions. What really is a sound? Where do the sounds begin? And what is the nature of the sounds? How do we engage with sounds? Sounds that we produce and sounds that are there around us. What is the degree of interaction, and what is the factor of influence between these two realms of sounds? And is the sound only the heard sound, or does sound originate also in the silence of movement, of vibrations? Okay, so all of these are again a whole world of questions that merit our deeper investigation. But in this context, I will also take on the word mantra in a more specific manner. So first we'll try and define a mantra, and we know that the definition of mantra is mananat trayate iti. Mananam comes from the root man, or the mind. Mananat in Sanskrit means from minding, or from putting your mind on it, from contemplation. Trayate, it protects us, etc. All right. So we'll try and understand what the word trayate means. So I will invite you here to do a certain experiment. So if we talk of the word trayate, I would like you to try and represent what trayate would signify at a physical level. So physically, if you feel protected, trayate means to feel protected, okay, or to protect. What kind of body language would you have? So if all of you could kindly just take this a little bit of, or if you want to unvideo yourself, like I was saying, and what does trayate, feeling protected, what does it signify physically? And if you are in the opposite state, if you're feeling unprotected, what would your body language be like? So if anybody would like to maybe unmute, unvideo, and share a thought on that. What does physiologically feeling unprotected feel like? Physically, what kind of action would you tend to do? Exactly. We see that the action is constrictive, right? And protection is automatically an action which opens up the being. So observe. So I'd like you to notice what is happening. So one is a constricted movement versus a larger open movement. Emotionally, what does to feel unprotected correspond to? So you could even type out your answers, or if you want to unmute and speak, whatever is convenient. So what would feeling exactly fear? And fear. So how does fear again represent itself? So the movement is fear is contraction, and caged, exactly, emotionally caged. It's all like that. And what's the opposite? The opposite is again emotionally, if you feel protected, there is, yes, wonderful, wonderful, wonderful answers. What is the opposite of that in terms of a emotional movement? Open, spacious, confidence, security. You see, all of that expands. Similarly, psychologically, what does the opposite of fear psychologically, what would it represent? Mentally you would have anxieties, uncertainty, confusion, all of that would represent insecurity. And the opposite, to feel protected, means exactly to feel relaxed, open-mindedness. You have all of those positive things. And also to feel protected, one very important thing of feeling protected is the sense of trust. So the trust becomes a very important factor that opens up happiness. Somebody said happy, comfort, trust, wonderful. So if you see that the common thing between the effect, the vibrational effect of non-protection versus protection, is the fact that when we feel unprotected, the vibrational effect is a contraction. Whereas the moment you talk of protected, the feeling is of an openness. So we are talking somewhere of the fact that whatever these mental movements, manana, this contemplation is doing to us, one of the fundamental effects that it is having on our vibrational nature is that it is opening us up, it is expanding us in some way. So now then the question comes that how can sounds expand us? How can, because mantras are sounds, so how do sounds expand us? What are the different ways in which sound can expand us? Exactly, they have a positive effect on us. So we see that they have a positive effect in us because when you're when you're reciting a mantra and you're understanding what it says, so there is a cognitive level benefit of it because you're understanding it, and you are normally the meaning of the mantras is widening. So there is a cognitive benefit of chanting a mantra, and therefore there is an opening up of the being at a mental level. At an emotional level, some of the mantras also relate to a certain aspect of bhakti or a certain giving of oneself, a certain element of surrender. So at an emotive level also, the mantra is resulting in a kind of a relaxation of the being. And finally, there is a physiological effect of it where it is having a certain very specific effect on our system at a vibrational level, and that is also opening us up in many ways. All right, so mananath trayate, so just by this word trayate or protection, one starts understanding that first and foremost we are an individual, we are not like just one block, we are made of multiple layers, and those layers are also vibratory layers within us. So as many of my friends are already aware of, when we talk of us at a vibratory level, we are made of different densities of vibrations. So at a physical level, these densities are very, very thick. I mean, they're very close packed. Okay. At an emotional level, it's a little more loose. At a mental level, it's a little more loose. And then you have the upper two layers of Vijnana and Ananda, which are a little more opened up and which are in tune with the higher things. So we are made of multiple layers of reality in ourselves. And then we are also made of, the world itself has three levels. There is a gross level of reality, which is known as the Adi Bhautikam. There is a subtler level, or the level of the level that you can't grasp with your senses. The gross level is graspable by the senses. The subtle level is not graspable by the senses. And then you have an ideal level, which is beyond, which is the Adhyatmika. So the Adhyatmika level, the highest spiritual, then the second level of the Adhibhautika, Adidaivika, which is the subtle occult, and the third one, Adhibhautika, or the material. Okay, so we are talking of two kinds of levels of reality. The first is within the individual himself, where the individual is constituted of vibrational levels at the physical level, vibrations at the emotional level, vibrations at the mental level, and vibrations at the higher spiritual level. And in terms of the relationship with the world around, there is the gross world that you can grasp with the senses, there is the subtle world that you cannot grasp with the senses, and there is an ideal world that is there in the which is in tune with the cosmic levels of reality. All right. The voice is not clear. Okay, I hope it is a little better now. I was told that the voice is not clear. It is clear. All right. So I will continue. So we have to understand that the individual is a sum total of these different vibratory forces within them. And therefore, the individual is also a sound. We are also transmitting devices. And that becomes extremely important to understand that we are transmitting something and we are being transmitted to. So how do we use mantras consciously in order to create a protection for ourselves, and by that nature also help to create that positive atmosphere around us and to extend the zones of protection in the world around us. Okay, so there is within oneself and outside of oneself. All right. So we will move on. So then it is also very interesting that the definition of mantra is mananat trayate, by contemplating on it. And the definition is not ucharanat, which means by pronouncing it. So it's not so much about the pronunciation, grossly the mantra. It seems to deal more with the contemplation of something. But yet it becomes important to understand what each of these are. So I will talk about Mananat Trayateti mantra, and that is what we have seen. And we have also looked at how Trayate can help us understand the importance of the feeling of protection and what it corresponds to. And the fact that Manana signifies at a subtler mental level. Okay. So this big concept question of the fact that what is the relationship between these worlds. So when we understand the individual, we will start seeing what is the impact of the sound level with the rest of the being, and the mental vibration with the rest of the being. And so it's also important, therefore, if we are transmitting and receiving, the question is that what are we tuning into? Who is tuning in first and foremost? To what are we tuning in? Why are we tuning in? And how are we tuning in? All of these questions become extremely important to understand. So I thought I will just put this and then I will just share another drawing with you. So here we have the Panchakosha theory of being, which is essentially about vibration. And it is also, so it's essentially vibrational. So I will just move on to a picture. Oh, this is also nice to see everybody here like this. So I'll try and explain the same thing to you. I'll try and explain the same thing to you in a drawing manner. All right. So first and foremost, so we see that we have a gross level of a reality. Okay, so we have a gross level of reality and it corresponds to dense vibratory patterns. Then we have a more subtle energy level, which is not as continuous. Okay, which means basically that it has a little more freedom in it. Okay, and that corresponds to our emotional level, the prana level. And it is a little more free. And then we have another level, which is the mind level, which starts getting even more subtle and even more spread out thin. And this is our okay, and that's the mental level, and it has a little more loose kind of frequencies. Okay, so normally we are impacted by this level of our reality. Okay, I will just undo that last one. we are impacted by this larger, all of this is our sum total generally. Okay. And then what we also know is that when you go beyond it, you see that there is a layer of our being which is unaffected by the mental and all of that. So I request please nobody else to start drawing on that. Okay, and then so that corresponds to a much larger entity of ourselves. And finally, we have the level of our vibratory being, which is resonating at a cosmic level. Okay, and that is much freer. And that really has very little conditioning to it. All right. So now what becomes very important is that when we are vibrating in ourselves, we are not normally in this harmonious, smooth manner. If you have to look at the vibratory nature of our being, we are more often like that at the physical level, and we are, if not more, like that at the emotional level, and quite dramatic also at the mental level. And these are unaffected, fortunately. So when we talk of tuning in, we are talking of this level of our being that we are conscious of. We are conscious of only this level of our being. And what are we trying to tune into? So when I say that we tend to refer to this particular conglomeration of who we are. So when we are saying that I am trying to tune in, we are trying to tune into something which is in harmony with the larger context. Get that? So our attempt is to go from a level of dis-ease to a level of greater ease. So from a complicated physiological being, we are trying to get to more balanced out, harmonized, vibrational, physically nature. We are trying to do that at an emotional level, and we are trying to do that at a mental level. So that's where this whole mantra thing becomes important, because what is a mantra? A mantra is the fact that we are using conscious sounds in order to create very conscious effects in ourselves and around us. The sounds of the mantra, another way of defining the mantra is that it is systematized sound technology. And what do I mean by systematized sound technology? That when we make sound, so this is something that I've shared also quite often, is that when we are making a certain sound, we have a very specific effect. When we are changing that sound, we are changing the effect. So if somebody is playing the violin and they're a little off note, they're not going to experience the full amplification of getting the right note. Okay, so when we hit the right note, then the entire experience changes very differently. So mananam of the sounds implies that we are allowing this tune to play within our system. So I don't know how to change colors. So basically what I'll just try and say that supposing you have a noisy system, the other important thing is that this system is not a compartmentalized system. They are all an interrelated system. So if I start opening this up like that, automatically it will pull this to open up. Automatically that will pull this to open up. Just like if I am in a battlefield and somebody is playing a beautiful sound, it is automatic for the ear to get tuned into the sound of the flute. So I think it is not a coincidence that Sri Krishna has the flute with him. I think it's quite significant and it's quite symbolic in terms of the fact that it seems to correspond to what a mantra does within the noisy, I would say the war-like situation in terms of sounds within our system. So when we are listening to a mantra or when we are chanting a mantra, we are allowing ourselves to tune in to the larger sounds of the flute. All right, to the sounds of that beautiful sound that is there. And that sound corresponds to certain cosmic vibrations that exist. Because The origin of the mantra is not that it has been created by the human mind. This is very important to understand. The very notion of a mantra is that those who are creators of a mantra, in a sense, or they are the receivers of a mantra. So they are known as mantra drashtaraha. They are seers of the mantra, and they are mantra shrotaraha. They are listeners of the mantra. So how can one listen or see the mantra if the mind is in this noisy shape? We see that it is only when it starts becoming quiet like this that it starts reflecting the vibrations of something else that is happening. And then it becomes a receiver and a transmitter of that particular sound. All right. So I'll stop sharing this for now. And I hope that I will find it when I come back. So having said this, I would also like to tell you that, so we have seen that the mantra is then allowing us to tune in to something else. So I will share with you the PPT here. All right. So like I was saying that essentially, therefore, we are this 5-layered being, and we are essentially vibrational in nature, because everything is fundamentally energy. So no matter which level you go to its depth, you will arrive at this vibrational nature of oneself. And the other thing that is very important is that this level is full of awareness and consciousness. Okay. So I just wanted you to do an experiment here. So I'd like you to close your eyes and take a deep breath and just chant the sound, make the sound. So can you do that? So close your eyes. I'd like everybody to try. So close your eyes, take a deep breath and make the sound. One thing that you will notice is that when you do the sound ah or you do the sound om, long after you have completed the sounds, the ucharana or the pronunciation of the sound, these sounds continue to reverberate within ourselves. So there is the gross level of the sound, but even when that audible sound ceases, the subtler level of those sounds continue within our being. And it is allowing that subtle level of the sound to continue in our being that starts impacting the multiple layers of who we are. Okay, and what you would also notice is that the sound R corresponds to our basic experience, our experiential, our existential being. So if you had to represent the sound R, very typically it would correspond to an opening up of yourself. And that opening up of ourself is also one very powerful way of undoing the internal vibrational blocks of our being. And in the Mandukya Upanishad also, they say that one who knows, who has mastered the ah, will no longer have any desires. I mean, it's quite a phenomenal thing to think about how could the making of the ah sound liberate an individual from the sense of desires. I will come down to it, but before I move on, one other experience that you have is that as you do the sound ah in an unconditioned manner, you will notice that it tends to open up a certain sense of liberation within oneself. And that also corresponds to a happiness. So from a constricted self, it opens up to a larger opening being. So you see, just that movement of the ah serves to move us from contraction to a certain expansion. And it is very, I've said this earlier also, that the sound ah is like our identity card in sound, because it is telling us the quality of our existential space. If you have an ah which is like that, you would know that it is representing an inner space which is constricted, like the second image of spaces that I showed you, versus an which represents a much freer inner space. So what does these freer inner spaces and all mean are things we will also look at. Okay, and therefore when we do the om, so we know that at a vibrational level, the ah opens up our being. The oo, if you do the oo, it helps to unify everything. So the ooh, even in terms of sounds, is like an experience of bringing things together. The ooh and the acts like a centering element. So we see that just vibrationally, it is about opening up, expanding oneself, becoming all comprehensive with the experience of love. One of the biggest qualities that can help us to experience this oneness with all is the experience of love, is the emotion of love. It is love that helps to break down a lot of barriers. And it is, if one is full of love, then it is also another very powerful tool to help us cleanse and forgive and let go. And very interestingly, again in the Mandukya Upanishad, when they talk of the oo, they say that the oo is the sound. One who knows how to master the sound oo will not have anybody born in that family who is not a knower of the Brahman. And what does it mean not to be a knower of the Brahman? So the Brahman is that experience of the expansiveness of the energy that we are essentially. So if we are essentially energy beings, our real experience doesn't correspond to that. Our real experience, the I, is constricted within a form. The I is defined by the emotions that we have. The I that we associate with is defined with the mental, with the noise of mental movements that are there in our mind room. So when we are able to let those things go, for whatever reason, because of the love of God, the love of a person, the love of anything, that allows us to relax our being, that has the potential to let go many things, to forgive. And that allows to do a kind of washing up, the cleaning up of the subconscious. It's a very interesting, it's a very interesting area to delve into, to see what exactly are these sounds doing to us at a mental level. What are they? How are they connected to us at an emotional level? And then therefore, what happens to us physically? So you would see that if somebody is all the time worried and all, the whole face also gets constricted. And sometimes you see that when they let go, the entire being opens up in a very incredible manner. Okay. So we see that therefore this conscious energy stuff is also awareness. So the awareness of our deeper self. And the Om, when we do vibrationally, allows us to feel a sense of oneness with everything around us. So I invite you to now just do the Aum and the Om. So we'll do the Aum once and then followed by the Om, and just allow yourself to experience what it is doing to you. So just close your eyes and just allow the sound Aum to sort of rise from the throat all the way up to your lips. Okay. So close your eyes and do that. So I've just tried to show to you how physiologically that there is a certain connection between all the levels. I mean, at the vibrational level, how we are interconnected within ourselves. All right. Talking of Ucharana, there is something, Ucharana means pronunciation. So where does the pronunciation start playing a role? So we again see that there are these 4 levels of speech: Para, Pashyanti, Madhyama, and Vaikhari. Para represents the spiritual, it is the ideal that we saw. That then gets connected, Pashyanti, where the individual connects with it through the mind lens very often. Okay, we are looking at it. That then gets translated within the individual system, which is the Madhyama, or I have equated that to the emotional. And that then finds its resonance in the physical, or the Vaikhari, or the physical expression of it. So what is this again? So very physiologically, I'll go to reverse order. Okay. So physiologically, the Sanskrit alphabets are arranged in a manner that they do a very systematic touch. This is the human vocal system. They do a very systematic touch of the different parts of the human vocal system here. And as you can see that when you're doing this very systematic touch of the being, this corresponds to a certain region of the brain, which would again have a very systematic effect on the different parts of our body. In terms of chakras, the different letters of the Sanskrit alphabet correspond to the different chakras of the different letters correspond to the different chakras of the being. And therefore, just the recitation of the Sanskrit alphabet is acting like a way of not just something that you're pronouncing, just some random sounds that you're pronouncing. No. The reason for the precision of Sanskrit alphabets is because it is doing a physiological brain massage work, and therefore it becomes important to pronounce things correctly at a physical level. Okay, that precision of the physical level is important. It's just like if you're tuning into a radio and that radio is not very well tuned in, you will get a sound, you will probably connect to a channel, but the noise will be very jarred. Whereas the moment you hit it right, the effect is completely different. So the importance of correct pronunciation is this connecting to the right energy circuits within ourselves and cosmic circuits outside of ourselves, so that the truth of that sound then succeeds in creating a very different energy space within and without the individual. Okay, so I will say only that much about the pronunciation of it, but we know that the pronunciation is not just at the pronunciation level also. This is a very important thing I thought I would like to share with you, because just try to think of Om and trying to understand what it is doing to us physiologically helps us to also understand why probably this sound has been given such an important role in our tradition. So we see that the sound ah, I'm going back to the previous one, comes from the throat. Okay, so the sound oo comes from the lips here. So when you try to go from ah to oo, it's like ah. So the sound that is in the middle is the o. Okay, so it really is like this. So I hope you can, I don't know if you can see this. Can you see this rubber band that I have here? So if you see, if you have a thread and you pluck it, it's not very visible. So if you have a thread and you want to get the maximum vibration of that thread, where will you pluck it? You will pluck it in the middle. If you pluck it in the middle, you will get the maximum amplification or resonance within that particular string. Okay, you will get the maximum vibratory. You will optimize the vibratory nature of that string when you pluck it in the center. If you pluck it in one part, you will get something, but then it will not be as ample as if you pluck it in the center. So when you're doing the Om, there are many people who do Om. So when you do the ah, it's like if you have ah at this end and oo at this end, you're plucking it somewhere here. If you do an oo, you're plucking it somewhere there. If you're doing an then you're plucking it here, here. At all points, you're plucking the string, so that the whole thing starts reverberating. All right. And then when you're doing the Om, then you're plucking it right in the middle and allowing that maximum thing to happen. Now it's very important. I'll try and show another thing to you. It's called entrainment. Okay. And what's happening in the brain really? So if you look at a vibratory nature and we see ourselves as this multiple vibratory noise structure, what is happening when we are doing the this Om? So I want to show you this video on it's a TED talk, and it's a TED talk by, as you can see here, Yuri Harrison, and it's on how our brains communicate. All right, but I just want you to listen to this particular part of the neural entrainment, and he's going to explain to us what is physical entrainment as well. So if you understand this, we start understanding what the Om is really doing to our system.
And we call this effect neural entrainment. And to explain to you what is neural entrainment, let me first explain what is physical entrainment. So over here you can see 5 metronomes. And think of these 5 metronomes as 5 brains. And similar to the listeners, before the story starts, this metronome is going to click, but they're going to click out of phase. Now see what will happen when I'm going to connect them together by placing them on these 2 cylinders. Now these 2 cylinders start to rotate. And this rotation and vibration going to the wood and going to couple all the metronomes together. And now listening to the click.
Hariom, we cannot see the video actually.
Oh God.
Yeah.
Okay, sorry. One second. So basically,
listeners, before the story starts, connect them together by placing.
All right, I will just explain to you what is happening here. So he's saying that.
So over here you can see 5 metronomes.
I'll repeat
and think
it.
of these 5 metronomes as 5 brains. And similar to the listeners, before the story starts, this metronome is going to click, but they're going to click out of phase. Now see what will happen when I'm going to connect them together by placing them on these 2 cylinders. Now these 2 cylinders start to rotate. And this rotation and vibration going to the wood and going to couple all the metronomes together. And now listening to the click. And this is what we call physical entrainment. And now let's go back to the brain and ask, so what's driving this neural entrainment? Is it simply the sounds that the speaker is producing? Or maybe it's the words? Or maybe it's the meaning that the speaker is trying to convey?
All right. So I will take on from there, because what he's trying to say is that our brains are also like in this noisy structure generally. But when we start listening to sounds, then our minds slowly start acting like this physical entrainment and they tune along with it. He is talking very specifically in the case of they took 5 people who were, and they did their brain measurements and they were going randomly in some order. Then somebody came in and said, now I'm going to tell you a story. And as he starts narrating the story, all the brains gradually start moving in a very similar fashion. So his question is it in the sound? Is it in the word? Is it in the meaning? Is it in the sentence? Where exactly is this neural entrainment taking place? So what we see with the Sanskrit mantras is that when we are allowing these conscious sounds to play in ourselves, because these sounds are not originating from the human mind, which is already a noisy structure. They're originating from something which is beyond it, which says, now I'm going to tell you a story, listen. And that story is not the story of our small human lives. Those stories are stories of grand cosmic visions. And therefore, when we start allowing ourselves to listen to those larger sound stories, then the rest of our being starts aligning with that. And when we allow that alignment to take place, we suddenly start shifting from that noisy ourselves to a much more harmonized being within ourselves. And it is therefore quite interesting to understand that when we are doing the Om, like I said, is when we are plucking it in the middle. It's a very consistent, centrally plucked vibration that we are doing. So when the Om starts sounding in our otherwise noisy sound structure, then it is as if we are telling ourselves that, come on, let's press the master reset button. So if we put in the master reset button, because it's the symbol place where all the other sounds start subsiding. So when we play that master reset button, the more often we are playing that master reset button within us, the more we are allowing all the other offbeat, off alignment sounds to start resonating with a sound which is more neutral. there is a lot of mysticism that is associated with the sound Om. But in my understanding, uh, if one really understands the physiological nature of the sound, we can start understanding also what is happening at a deeper level. So the human being, I'll try and depict it to you in a horizontal manner. At a deepest level of the being, the vibrations are in alignment. Like if we look at nature, we see that nature is naturally in tune with something else. How do the birds know where to fly if they have never? How do they migrate thousands of miles? How does a tree know that this is the right time to flower? How does the whole of nature function? The whole of nature seems to be in tune with some other larger intelligence at work. So the human being also foundationally has the capacity of tuning in to this larger cosmic intelligence at work. But we stop listening to it because we start our own noise. Mental, we are full of our mental apprehensions, biases, memories, and so many things. So it's not a silent room. The waters are completely ruffled at an emotional level. Because of the mental thoughts, the emotion is all churned up. Because of the emotion and mind being churned up, the body has its own constrictions that follow. But when we start producing the Om aloud, so Om, the ucharan of it adds like an auto feedback mechanism into ourselves. That auto feedback mechanism into ourselves allows the rest of the being to gradually start getting into a form of entrainment with the cosmic sound that is behind it. So somebody is saying that why do birds always sing or chant every morning at a certain time? So that is also because these sounds are because they have their own language, they have their own way of communicating, and their language is not I would say shadowed by vested interests. Okay, I mean, it's very interesting. I think those who are working in animal studies areas will try and understand whether animals really conspire. Are they really engaging in this planning, or they do it because it's time for them to procreate, maybe, and therefore they are in tune with something larger than themselves. Okay, so that's the But what I wanted to mainly show is that a lot of nature functions on this concept of the right tuning into something else. And one of the main objectives of the mantra is to help us tune in our system to larger truths within ourselves, which are not affected by our personalized consumption of the world around us. Okay, so our inner nature. So we've looked at Vaikhari, this Vaikhari. So I'll try and show it to you as a person. So when we are making sounds, those sounds, where do they have their origin? So that sound has its origin. Every sound has its origin in somewhere beyond. We are reproducers of certain sounds rather than producers of certain sounds. It's important to understand that. So how correctly are we reproducing those sounds? Especially in the Sanskrit language, where Sanskrit has a certain transparent structure of sound production and the experiential nature of that sound that has been produced. Okay, so if there is a para and the individual is seeing it, that seeing is then getting translated through the system of the individual, and that is then being expressed through the individual mouth. So that the place where the distortion occurs is really through this intermediate region of the individuals. So the intermediate region is the region which is full of that noise. And this is where I'd like to just continue sharing my PPT with you, where I am saying that the Om, when we're doing it physiologically, how we understand that it acts as this master reset button, because it is a very neutral, optimum sound that the vocal system can produce. Okay, and what is it doing at an emotional level, so at the madhyama, the middle level, we need to bring in this sukha or bhuma, this excellent spaces. We need to bring in this fullness into ourselves. And how does that happen? I'm taking on the word from the Yoga Sutras, which is klishta and aklishta. So the normal nature, klishta means complex, aklishta means uncomplex. So is our inner being complex or is our inner being uncomplex? The more complex it is, the more noisy it is. The more noisy it is, in a sense, if it is not in tune with each other, we can have extremely complex but harmonized internal beings. But generally, the internal, so the mind is thinking something, the emotion is feeling something else, and the physical being is doing something else. This lack of coordination of the three systems is what also results in a lot of noise in our external structures. So the importance is, how do we bring in, how do we move from a more complex klishta system to an aklishta system? And how do we move from a denser, more noisy, darkened system vibrationally to a more enlightened and free? So when you look at a dense vibratory pattern, it corresponds to tamasika, very dense. It's dark and dense. When you open it up a little more, it's more dynamic and mobile. Then it becomes a rajasika nature within. And then when it becomes more calm and quiet, harmonious, that's when we have the sattvika nature. So the mantra helps us also to move from a denser state of being to a more enlightened inner nature. And that then also corresponds to mentally, to being able to see the right of things. And that is why in the Yoga Sutra they say that the mind that can see the right things is Ritambhara, the mind which is the knower of the truth. And when the mind sees the truth, when it knows this Ritam or the right, and it sees the truth, which is Satya, then it starts experiencing the expanses of Brihat. Okay, and it is in this that the role of language becomes a question. So in Sanskrit, because it has spontaneously retained the transparencies of sound structures, from the seen to the expression, there is very little human distortion in the middle. The mere repetition of the Sanskrit sounds can open up the world of the original experience within us. And that's why the rishis who had in the quietness of their mind resonated with a certain spiritual experience, expressed them through the mantric tradition. So we do reverse engineering. We make those sounds and allow those sounds to resonate within our being. That resonance will then go back to giving us insight into the spiritual experience. Okay, but then the big question is, therefore, is only Sanskrit sounds mantric? And the answer is no, because what then becomes a mantra? And that's why I was very keen. It is 5 o'clock. I will try and take another 5 minutes and try and wrap this up for you. Maybe 10 minutes to be more honest. Okay, so and then we will close. All right, so when we are talking of mantra in its more universal context, very interestingly, Sri Aurobindo uses the idea of mantra in the process of the yajna, where you're doing the offering. And he says that symbolically mantra represents the truth of sounds. When truth is expressed in sounds, then it becomes a mantra. So there is a whole interplay that is happening between truth, translation of truth, and expression of truth. So there seems to be these truth structures. Then there is the way in which we are processing those structures. And then there is an output where we are expressing those structures. Now, normally what happens, other than Sanskrit, most other languages don't have a natural embeddedness of truth structures in their sounds. So they correspond to meaning. So a word like peace in English means peace, but the sound peace doesn't mean peace, because you can have a piece of cake. So the sound peace doesn't correspond to the experience of peace. It is when it is written in a particular way that we are associating it with the meaning of a certain experience. Sanskrit words like shantihi have an intrinsic sound quality to convey that experience to us. But having said that, the sound is an expression of a certain intention, of a certain thought. For an individual whose thoughts are aligned with intention and whose speech and actions are all in alignment, it doesn't matter what sound they make and what language they use. So when a great person, the person can belong to any culture. So for example, Sri Aurobindo's Savitri is said to be a mantric word. It is said that every word written in that is a mantra. Similarly, the words of great masters, it doesn't matter what language it is expressed in. The language itself becomes mantric because of the content and the source from which they are being expressed. So when a seer, when somebody who has achieved a certain level of inner purification utters a sound, there is no distortion that is happening in their being. What they are seeing of the para is directly what they are conveying through their words. And therefore that word becomes a carrier of a direct experience. So why are our normal words also not mantric? Because our systems do not have the laser-like nature. Our systems are diluted. When I will try to go back to the picture that I had. So our systems are these noisy structures which in their overall output are in a very diluted nature in terms of a vibrational output. What yoga helps us do is, and the mantra helps us do, is to help us align the different sound structures within us. When the sound structures are aligned, then we become more laser-like. This alignment is the process of the practice of truth in us. So in the Indic tradition, it is not a surprise that one thing that was given great importance is the practice of truth. Because the more one practiced truth, the more one started this process of alignment. The more one started the process of alignment, the more one went into an entrainment mode with the highest real things. And what was then uttered became creative. What was uttered became creative of realities. That's why when great rishis said something, it could be a curse, it could be a blessing, it had to necessarily transpire because a vibration was put into action. A laser was moved in a particular direction, and that would have to have its particular result. All right. So it becomes very important to start understanding this, the power of the nature of vibratory alignments in ourselves. So in order to summarize maybe what I was saying about the mantra is a very powerful tool, and it is said in the Kali Yuga, it is our tool of moksha. It is the tool for liberation. And why? Because in the Kali Yuga, truth is completely got sidelined by a lot of noise. In today's world, with so much of internet and technology, I'm talking of a lot of communication that is happening. It has become very difficult to know what is true news and what is fake news. So truth itself is really very difficult to ascertain in an age where everybody is expressing everything that they know, whether it is truthful or not. Okay. And therefore we are living in a world of, if you have to look at it vibrationally, it's a lot of darkened noise structures. And the whole point is, how do we start bringing in light? So the role of the mantra is like that guiding light that will allow the rest of the being to align itself by the power of its own truth, and therefore allow the being to become more and more laser-like, and to have the glimpse of the larger truth, the greater universal right that is there around us. It's not somewhere else. And therefore, when I hope you've understood this picture here, and therefore, I'll go back to my video, to the PowerPoint. At a mind, at a mind level, this mantra. So I will come back to this mantra thing. Therefore, the goal is to align ourselves to that truth, and this simple mantra is a powerful one to help us connect to that. It says Harihi Om Tat Sat. Harihi comes from the root Hr, which means to remove. So Harihi is that which removes. What is that? That thinking of that being, those ideal beings, maybe it be Krishna or Vishnu or whoever, allows us, the very thought of that being allows us to start dropping our pettinesses within us. And therefore, Harihi Om. Harihi is that Om, unifying Om. Tat Sat, that truth. So this particular mantra is very interesting because each of the words can signify everything else. So Om is also Harihi. Om is also a remover of obstacle. And Tat Sat, that truth is also Om. That truth is also Harihi. So I would invite you to just join chanting this once, and then we'll just quickly do the other two, and we'll also close soon after. Okay, so please repeat after me once, and then you can join along. So I normally do it like this. So I say Hari Om. So Hari, I show at the three levels. There's the physical level, there's an occult, and there's a spiritual. And Tat Sat is that truth is deep within us. So Hari Om Tat Sat. Repeat after me. Hari Om Tat Sat. Hari Om Tat Sat. Hari Om Tat Sat. Hari Om. Once more. Hari Om Tat Sat. Hari Om Tat Sat. Hari Om Tat Sat. Hari Om. I'll stop share and I'll do it so you can see me clearly. Hari Om Tat Sat. Hari Om Tat Sat. Hari Om Tat Sat. Hari Om. There is another mantra which is Om Namah Shivaya. So these are all very mantras that you're already familiar with. So we have Om Namah Shivaya, and Shiva is very interesting because Shiva represents that energy of destruction. So Shiva is that force in us that allows everything to let go. It's that energy that says, let go so that you can be born anew at every moment. And therefore, when we say Om Namah Shivaya, we are allowing ourselves to be cleansed by the Ganga, by that flow of truth that is there within us. So allow that flow of truth to wash our whole beings with Om Namah Shivaya. So we'll just chant that once. I request you to repeat after me. Om Namah Shivaya Om. Om Namah Shivaya. 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 So when we are doing this chant, for example, we are allowing ourselves to engage in a few things. So one is the image of Shiva that is allowing us to cleanse our past and let us be in the present moment at all times. Secondly, we are also doing a certain energy circuiting within ourselves. We have to remember the Sha, Va, Ya, Na, Ma, they correspond to different chakras. And therefore, it is an energy circuiting that we are doing within ourselves. And more precise energy circuiting, more precise the effect, overall effect of that. It's like the passwords that we are using to open up the worlds of certain dimensions in front of us. Okay. And the last one in this series is Loka Samasta Sukhino Bhavantu. Repeat once more. We'll repeat twice more. Loka Samasta Sukhino Bhavantu. So let all the worlds. Last time, Loka Samasta Sukhino Bhava. The world is corresponds to expansion, which corresponds to fullness. So let all the worlds within not have constrictions, but open up to their intrinsic fullness that is there. And this final mantra summarizes it all. It says, make me go from untruth to truth. Asato ma sadgamaya. Make me go from darkness to light. Tamaso ma jyotirgamaya. And make me go from death to immortality. Mrityor ma amritang gamaya. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. This is from the Brihadaranyaka Upanishad. And a very beautiful meaning is that the hope that we have that the mantras bring us is that we are in a world of darkness. There is no doubt about that. In terms of sounds, we exist in a world of noise and darkness. How is it possible? How can we find the light within that darkness? There's no other world to go to. So the other meaning of this verse is lead me to the truth of the falsehood. Lead me to the light of the darkness and lead me to the immortality of death. The more we are able to go from noisy structures, which are inherently destructive because there's a lot of wear and tear that happens in a noisy structure. The more we move from a noisy structure to light structures of resonances and harmonies, the more spontaneously there is less of death that would occur. I mean, it's interesting to understand how these concepts would reflect themselves at the different levels of our being. And so we have this verse which is, repeat after me. Om Asato Ma Sadgamaya Tamaso Ma Jyotirgamaya Mrityorma Amritangamaya. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. So this mantra is not just an aspiration for all of these, but the chanting of the mantra is the tool to give us these experiences. Okay, so the mantra itself is the way that can lead us to truth, to light, and to immortality at all levels of our being. So with these words, I'd just like to conclude with Sri Aurobindo's definition of the mantra. He says that the theory of the mantra is that it is a word of power born out of the secret depths of our being, where it has been brooded upon by a deeper consciousness and then thrown out silently or vocally, precisely for the work of creation. The mantra can not only create new subjective states in ourselves, alter our psychical being, reveal knowledge and faculties that we did not before possess, can not only produce similar results in the other minds than that of the user, but can produce vibrations in the mental and vital atmosphere, which results in effects, in actions, and even in the production of material forms on the physical plane. So for these words, Bahu Dhanyavadaha, thank you very much. And we'll chant an Om together and maybe just take 5 minutes of questions and then close. So we'll just say an Om. I would suggest that we do the Om together And we'll do it with the namaste. Please join me. And as you do the Om, understand that allow yourself this reset button in yourselves. The resetting of the button from our reduced self to our original factory make self, which is in tune with all of nature, which is in tune with the deepest secrets of this universe. So we'll do an Om and the Shanti 3 times, which corresponds to the 3 worlds: the physical world, the occult, spiritual, and the occult and the spiritual. So when we say the 3 Shantis, we become like an incarnation of peace. So when we say the Shanti, I'd request you also to do Sha, like open your mouth with the Shanti. There's no hurry. There is an establishment of that peace in all the levels. Okay. So please join me. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti